Good evening. We will call to order the meeting of the Bethany City's Planning and Zoning Commission for December 7th, 2017. The invocation this evening will be from Commissioner Clemmer.
May you bow your heads and we'll pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this season, and we pray that we'll remember the season and that you will guide and direct this body and help us make logical and clear decisions. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Will you stand for the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item this evening will be the approval of the minutes from our meeting of September 7th, 2017. Are there any changes, amendments, or corrections? If there are none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, please cast your votes.
Nope, we're not on.
To the audience, the Planning Commission is a recommending body to the City Council. The City Council may accept, reject, or modify our decisions or recommendations. An exception this evening will be item number 1, where the decision the board reaches will be the final stop on that program. Item number 1, PC 1715, is to make a determination of the parking demand created by a student housing facility constructed on the campus of Southwest Christian University. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. It's always good to see you close to the holidays. We have a packed house. We always bring them in for a parking determination. That's always exciting and packs them in. Anyway, this item is a request for a parking demand determination for a student housing facility constructed on the campus of Southwestern Christian University. SCU recently completed an on-campus housing facility. The University has submitted a revised site plan to reflect the actual as-built conditions, as well as some additional modifications that will bring the facility into compliance with our current site plan ordinance. SCU was granted a temporary conditional certificate of occupancy by the City Council on August 1st of this year. The conditions of the CO were basically the site plan improvements being in place by the end of this year. So we're kind of on the clock here. They have submitted, as I said, the revised site plan. It is correct in form and complete. The problem is our parking ordinance does not specifically list university student housing and requires this commission to make a determination of the required parking. I would like to stress to the commission that this is a parking determination only. This is not a site plan review. The site plan is currently eligible for staff level approval if the commission determines that the existing parking meets the requirements. So having said that, we'll move on. We'll start with the aerial photo. It's a little bit hard to see on the projector. Did we turn that off? There he is. The campus is all of this area in here. The red is the new housing facility in here. 39th Expressway to the north, Divis runs along the east of campus. This is Eldon Lyon Park to the south. The Pentecostal headquarters here, as well as the soccer fields over here. This is the site plan. I kind of jumped there. But this is the actual site plan that is currently turned in. Again, you can see the proposed facility right here. They've added this fire lane that comes down from the parking lot. There's a new fire line with a hydrant on the end of it. They will be putting in some sidewalk along Divis here, as well as up on 39th Expressway in here. They've done a lot of cleanup work to the site plan. Again, it's very nice. Mr. Clemmer and I could not do one of these without seeing a grading plan, and there it is. I really do have a reason to have it up here tonight. This kind of roundish area down at the bottom, that's a new and improved detention system. This design is vastly superior to the original design, and I expect it will do much better than the original. I was very happy to see SCU follow up on that. This was a part of their master parking plan that they were nice enough to send us. This shows all of the existing buildings, all of the existing parking. The problem is, for a parking determination such as this one, normally some of this stuff might not normally be counted. This little pad's driving me crazy. Okay, there. 422 is what they count. Unfortunately, there's 100 right here. Those are not really on the campus proper, and it's not paved, so that would not normally be counted in a parking count. So that's 100 that normally wouldn't be counted. All these over on Divis are on the right-of-way or across on someone else's right-of-way, and so there's another 82 that would not normally be counted. And based on what the fire department and SCU has turned in, because of that new fire line and the maneuvering of the fire apparati, about 6 spaces were lost out of this lot. So the count that we would normally use for planning purposes would be, instead of 422, would be down to 234. So staff looked at some other cities, not that you would have to follow anything any other city does, but sometimes it helps to see what others are doing. And you can see Norman and Weatherford were like Bethany. They don't have any specific standards. Midwest City, Oklahoma City, War Acres all had this 1 space per 4 classroom seats, plus some more for the general group residential housing. Shawnee was really weird with that stuff, with 6 spaces per classroom plus assembly for basketball courts and auditoriums, stuff like that. And then Edmond treats UCO just as a part of their central core zoning district, so that one's a little bit unique as well. The Southwest Christian data, they were nice enough to provide, again, we went through the parking, 234 existing. They have 403 total seats in their classrooms, 282 students living in their on-campus housing, and we were able to take the footprints of the buildings from aerial photos and count the stories and things, and have estimated the gross floor area of the campus buildings at 140,000 square feet. So those are the numbers we can plug into those formulas that we saw before and analyze what's there. If we use the Edmond standard, this facility would be short 116 spaces, which is not insignificant. However, staff does not believe that the SCU campus area in any way resembles the downtown Edmond core. So we don't believe that that's directly applicable to the SCU situation. Similarly, using the Oklahoma City War Acres standard of 1 per 4 class seats and the additional for the housing, they would only be 8 spaces short. Well, when classes are in session, even the most casual observer will see that they are more than 8 spaces short. So even the Oklahoma City War Acres standard may not be particularly effective in this sense. Another piece of information the Commission should have, in 2009, this body did approve a parking plan for a new dorm on the SNU campus. That project included a reduction in available parking of 34 spaces. So that has been a case before and was approved. Again, you are not bound by any previous decisions of this commission. And last but not least, the building is complete and currently occupied. So the conditions of the temporary certificate of occupancy are very well likely determined or dependent on the determination you make tonight. So what conclusions can we draw? First of all, our code of ordinances offers no clear guidance on the parking demand for this facility and clearly leaves the burden of that determination upon you guys. The standards of other nearby cities don't seem to be offering us much clear guidance either. They don't seem to fit very well so we don't have a lot to go on there. The actual in-the-field conditions do suggest that the current parking is inadequate during peak class periods. I must stress, though, and it's fair, SCU is certainly not unique in its parking situation. Most universities and even schools have inadequate parking during peak periods. Anybody who's driven around at peak time will know that already. We talked about the previous commission decision at SNU. While no means binding to this situation, it was a similar in that a new dorm with a reduction in parking was allowed. And I want to really stress that if the commission deems this current parking inadequate by even one space, that will render this current site plan deficient, and it will make it not approvable by staff at that point. There is almost no way that SCU would be able to do a new site plan, revise and all that by the end of the year, so it would make it practically impossible for them to meet the conditions of their current CO and would have serious implications, maybe up to and including perhaps not allowing the students to move back in for the spring semester. So again, don't want to sway anyone or anything, but you need to know that this is significant to the university. The required action. Thank you, Daniel. The parking ordinance requires a parking demand determination from the commission before the site plan can be finally approved. Since this site plan doesn't propose any new parking, basically this determination comes down to a decision about whether the existing parking provides sufficiently efficient and safe movement of traffic as required by the site plan ordinance. That's really what this decision is about tonight. I believe that concludes my remarks. I would be happy to answer any questions or offer any more information I have. The applicant's representatives are here to speak to anything you might want to discuss. So having said that, I will shut up.
Mr. Caton,
Mike?
it's on, I think. Is this on?
Yeah, I can hear you. Those were the on-site that live in the on-campus housing. That was the number that was given to us. They have more than that commute, but the ones in the on-campus housing, that was the number they provide.
Mike?
Sorry. Thank you. I do not know, but I'm sure the applicant's representative could answer that. Okay. I do not. I think they actually provided some information about the class schedule, and I'm again sure that they can lay that out there. Uh-huh.
Commissioners, any other questions of staff? If not, would the applicant representative or representatives come forward? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Brad Davis. I'm the Vice President of Student Services at Southwestern Christian University. I believe I can answer some of the questions. The 282 is our max that we can have on campus. The most that we've had living in the facility is 234. That was last fall, in fall of 2016, and currently we have 203 students living on campus this fall.
How many of those are drivers?
I have the permits that we gave out in 2017 for resident students is 123. Last year we gave out 131.
How many commuters do you have?
It would be, let's see, if we have This fall, we had 467 total traditional students. So do the math for about 264. Thank you, mathematician.
We got about 30 over. Okay, what times are those?
Our peak times are in the morning. I believe it was between the 7:30 and 10 o'clock. We have about 260 students. Well, they arrive at 7:30. Class starts at 7:50, but they start piling in. The good students do. You know, the other ones come at 8:15.
We usually have 7:30 classes. Now, did everything I could do for?
Yeah.
Do you have evening classes?
We do for our adult studies, our adults that come in the evenings on Tuesday and Thursday. There are some traditional students that have evening classes, but mostly on Monday night, and it's just a small amount.
When this program started, the conversation that I remember as it came through the city was that there would be parking available onto the east from the church headquarters. Did that fall through?
The church did approve for us to park there. The issue came from fire safety, being able to get around that way to the building, and so that's why the fire lane was created.
Okay.
But there's not any parking on that.
No, not on the
Not
IPHC property.
The what additional properties does the university own around that area?
We own a house on Divis. It's right there. I think it's 39th Terrace and Divis. We own the house right there and the property right behind it. It's next to the home that has, not parked near us. It's a big brown house. It's right by it. But we own that one house.
Now, the old steel fabrication location on the, be the southeast corner of the intersection of Divis, is that owned by the university, or is that a benefactor to the university?
I believe it's a benefactor. I know someone that bought it,
Right.
and they're letting that company continue to rent that facility out. Our intent is to purchase it back from our benefactor,
Okay.
but we don't own it right now.
That was part of the Heckard estate, and Raymond Heckard mentioned that it would have been purchased for the university, but at this time, I take it does not belong to the
Correct.
university.
We have not purchased it back from our benefactor.
Have you, the house that you mentioned, is it habitable, or is it one of those that is?
We had students in it about
Okay.
3 years ago, but we haven't had anyone in it since. It's just been used as they store some stuff in there.
Have you considered alleviating part of this parking difficulty by taking it down and using it as?
It's been in part of our discussion. But again, it'd have to turn it into paved parking. That's kind of our piece. We'll have to make some additional paved parking for it to work out well, and that's a financial piece for us.
Well, I remember when one of your buildings went in, there was a paving covenant granted because there were financial difficulties. It would have precluded the building. So you have an adjacent piece of property that can't be used for parking because you don't have the financial wherewithal right now to expand into it?
I would believe so, yes, sir. I mean, saying it that way, yes, sir. if it's required to have paved, no. And we could knock it down and have student, but the student parking over off of, by the IPHC building, our soccer field,
Yes, sir.
it's just grass. It's not even gravel, but students do park there. And then we were having students park on Divis. I spoke with Officer Justice, who's with the code, and of course, as soon as he told us we can't park here or there, we roped it off so students wouldn't park on Divis in the wrong areas. Bethany First Church is allowing us to park near the softball fields where they have, but again, that's not on our property, but that's where a lot of our commuter students park as well.
Well, you know, just the very few times a month that I might drive that area, I have to say that the parking is really atrocious when you have a full contingency of your students there.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Parking's part of my portfolio, and so I understand, what you're seeing as I see it as well, and trying to find a way to put students in the right spots are very important to me. Thankfully, that IPHC allowed us to park near the soccer field, and then we've had some parking on Divis, but in the areas that have caused issues from the coding situation, we roped those off immediately as soon as Officer Justice came and talked to me. So we want to be in compliance, and we're going to work with the city.
Okay. So you'd have the same problem money-wise if parking slots were slanted in on the west side of Divis?
Near
on
this-
your own property,
on our property?
perhaps. I'd have to ask Mr. Davis if the west side of Divis on their property, could parking be facilitated along that, on their property, but west of the Divis. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I can't answer whether it physically could be done or not, but legally it could be. Of course, if it's a parking lot, it has to be a paved surface. It'd have to have ingress and egress and not block the fire lane.
Well, what I
that
was
they have
thinking was
problems
just
before.
street pull-in, straight or slanted parking like you used to have at some places, like you have downtown Bethany. You have a,
You mean on the street? you're
yeah,
talking
just
about?
essentially on the street, but the actual car would be on their property.
That probably would be partially on the city right-of-way, and there is a provision in our code to allow parking on the right-of-way, but it requires a special permit from the city council. It also would require some pavement improvements, so,
Yeah, so that gets back to your
yeah.
money problem.
Yeah. And it depends on how much that would cost.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Davis, I'm going to ask you to stand by just a moment. I'm going to open it up and see if there's anyone in the audience that would like to come forward and address this issue. Hearing or seeing none, we will close the opportunity for public discussion. Comments, discussion, thoughts?
It appears we're pretty much in a box.
Unless you want to be the Grinch.
Yeah. Who up here wants to be the Grinch? Not me. But it appears that the university doesn't consider the total costs when they come to build an opportunity for people to stay in and not provide sufficient parking per their ordinances.
Steve, could you give a little history on the fact that the original site plan for this was approved and how it now is not approved? Am I misstating that?
Anybody that can use the word apparatus ought to be able to answer that.
The original site plan was approved at the staff level during a time when the community development director position, I believe, was vacant, and the city manager approved that, made that approval. Unfortunately, between that approval and now, the site plan, the actual construction did not correspond to the site plan. They talked about the fire lane that was added, some parking that had been provided or pledged was not allowed or not usable. There was a little issue with the fire lane, a few other issues with the site plan. So basically, they did not, the actual building did not match the approved site plan, so they had to upgrade the site plan to meet the current requirements. That's, in a nutshell, why we're back now doing this. Did that answer the question, or?
I think so. I just wanted them to have that history, and
Okay,
had they not changed their building plans, we wouldn't be here.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And if I could interject, just part of
Please.
that was, we lost some of those spaces due to fire safety whenever, because we wanted to be in compliance with what the fire department needed. And that school's been there for a long time. I went to school there from 92 to 95, and that parking lot, main parking lot configuration had always been that way. But when they needed that fire lane to go toward the new facility, we had to lose 6 spaces. And so I know it doesn't quite get us to the number that was necessary, but losing 6 for the safety of our students was very important to us. And so that's why we were in compliance on the safety issue as well.
Well, you know, Mr. Davis, this has been one of the more contentious developments in the last decade or so that I've had occasion to observe. And certainly, since the city does not address the numbers specifically by formula in our ordinance, it creates additional difficulties. But I will assure you that I will make every effort to make sure that we have an ordinance that specifies the numbers needed up front.
Yes, sir.
And I would suggest very strongly that the university reach out to its alumni and benefactors to be a good citizen and keep the streets open by providing adequate parking for your students.
Yes, sir. I agree. And our apologies. I don't want to have to use this tissue and cry in front of you guys tonight. But thanks for putting the box out. But humbly, we do ask for your help in this situation. Thank you.
Mr. Davis, if we go ahead and approve this, can we put some kind of tag on it that says they need to improve their parking spaces by date certain?
Sure, you could approve it and require it come back to you for review in the future to see what progress is being made.
Okay.
I suppose you could even couch it as a temporary number of spaces that you're approving tonight with additions to come in the future and set a time for that to happen.
Mr. Caton, how many additional spaces are we talking about? We haven't set a number, and I know there's not a requirement for the number, or at least.
We do not have a requirement. The other cities that we looked at, their requirements don't seem to make much sense. I am not aware of any good, hard, fast rule that I would be able to apply. It obviously depends on how many traditional students you have, how many international students you have. A lot of those more international students don't have cars. They come from societies that don't drive as much as we do. So I don't know if there is a hard and fast rule on how many you would need. I know all the time I spent down in Norman, parking was worse down there than it is over here as far as people parking in people's yards and on the streets and everywhere else. So it just seems to be a problem that stems from the early days when all students just lived on campus and walked, and now they've grown to the point and are not vehicle friendly.
Who owns the property just south of the university?
You do, the city of Bethany. That's
City of
Eldon
Bethany.
Line Park.
On the west side of Divis?
Yes. Oh, I mean, the park is
Yeah,
directly
yeah.
south.
I know where you're talking about.
If you're
Where the-
talking about the portion down further by 36, that's owned by an offshoot of the Southern Plaza, I believe.
Okay.
The area they got where the house was
Yeah,
torn down.
that's
and then
really where I
the
was thinking
School
about
or whatever.
where the house was. Who owns that?
As he pointed, it's affiliated with the Southern Plaza or SNU
Oh, okay.
First Church.
So then I guess we have to decide how many spaces they need to alleviate some of their parking issues.
I suppose we could offer a requirement for 10 or some such number to be available for the fall semester of next year. That would at least keep pace with any projected growth in your enrollment, so we don't exacerbate an already very difficult. Would that be?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to have to inject. If you require them to add even one parking space, that will add impervious area, which will render their drainage report and their detention system have to be redesigned. It would not be approvable at staff level if you require even one additional parking space.
Okay.
So,
Shall we, may we
That would
then?
be, that would be on the site where the building's located.
I'm
If they were
considering
across the street on the other side of Divis, that wouldn't necessarily be
well,
true.
yeah, I mean, I don't know legally how you make them do something off-site, but if they add parking to what's not parking, then they're going to be adding impervious area, and they would have to somehow account for that drainage. And that is part of a normal site plan review, and normally that would have to be taken care of in advance.
But it's a different site on the east side of Divis where they all own that property that they could tear down a house and build a lot. Would you consider that part of this?
Normally
the
speaking,
west
I
side?
believe Mr. Davis has informed us before that if there is a public right-of-way separating lots, that it is a separate lot. Recently, this Bethany Public Schools had their STEM building and a main campus at the same time, but because they were separated by a right-of-way, they were two separate projects.
Okay. It appears to me to be the only way we can come up with a solution is to see if they're willing by sometime in the future before fall, tear down that house and start a parking lot out of it.
Mr. Davis, would that be something you would think be feasible? Please, thank you.
It's something I have to bring before the cabinet and also someone who probably could help us do that. But is there a way that I could give you an answer on that? Like, do you need a definite answer tonight that it would be done, or are you?
Well, this is drug on and drug on and drug on, and we're up against the wall where we have to be a Grinch or,
We don't want Grinches, so let's say that we shall do so.
okay.
If it's that house being torn down and parking in that facility, we will do that.
Now, that separates the two projects because of the right-of-way
Correct.
thing, and that gives you some breathing room and us some room to move ahead.
Yes, sir.
Won't slow you down.
We can do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Clemmer, if you're going to make a motion, I would suggest that instead of a specific number, we just say appropriate number of paved parking spaces.
Okay.
Leave it to their discretion. Would that create a problem, David?
If I understand what you're going to approve tonight, would be the parking spaces that currently exist with the requirement by the fall semester of 2018 that they provide additional parking off-site.
Right.
And I would also say that part of that should be that it be set for review in July of 2018 on your agenda.
Okay. What he said in a motion. Why should I repeat all that?
Linda says she has that. Is there a second?
Second.
If there's no further discussion, please cast your votes. Thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho, ho.
Moving right along here to item number 2, PC 1716, a resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Bethany concerning Tax Increment Finance District Number 1 of the City of Bethany, adopting certain findings and analysis of the financial impact of the district, the necessity of tax increment financing for the development of the project area, and recommending approval of the district, project, and use of tax increment financing for assistance in the development of the project area. May we have a staff report?
I'll provide one if you'd like.
I was getting ready to say, this item was submitted by the city attorney, and I can think of no one that would be able to better explain something like this, certainly anyone better than me. So I will turn it over to Mr. Davis for the staff.
This involves a project at the location of Overholser Drive and 39th Expressway on the south side of 39th Expressway. Formerly Pauline's Bait Shop many years ago. It's been vacant for nearly 30 years now. The developer of this project acquired this property a few years back and has come up with a plan to develop it, but in his study of the property, there are so many problems with the property that it was determined it's not feasible to him economically to develop the property without public assistance. The public assistance in this case would involve the installation of infrastructure, which would be water, sewer, streets, public parking, and drainage facilities, and some other amenities, lighting, and some of those kinds of things. Developer is here to make a presentation to you of what this will look like, but this has been through a committee already that was composed of 2 Bethany officials and representatives of every taxing district that receives ad valorem taxes from this project or from this area. As you can imagine, being a vacant piece of property, the taxes are not very much on that property right now. But the way a TIF district works is that once this district is created, there'll be a base assessment value for that property. And then when it's completed, there'll be a new assessment value, which will be the value of the property after the buildings and improvements are in. The taxes that are generated off the difference between the value now and the value after it's finished are the funds that would be used to assist with infrastructure. So in a sense, the money that would normally be collected and go to the county and the library and the health department and the school, Putnam City Schools, would be diverted for a period of time to assist in development of this project. But recognizing that without the development of this project, that money wouldn't be there anyway. So at some point in time, that value and those increased taxes will accrue to those various taxing entities. The TIF Review Committee, which consisted of those people I mentioned, when I say TIF, that's Tax Increment Financing District. That group heard the presentation and recommended unanimously the approval of the plan. They determined that the financial impact on the city was positive. The financial impact to the area in general was positive. And one could hope that with this development that it will achieve some sort of maybe a domino effect for some of the other vacant properties in the area to develop. That's pretty much in a nutshell what we're looking at. And I think the developer's here, and I think it'd be wise at this point to hear from him so you'll see what we're talking about and let him explain to you how the monies would be used and those kinds of things.
I would like to take a side moment for my fellow commissioners to explain some of my personal relationship with the applicant. I've known Mr. Allen for about 20 years. We served on the Bethany Chamber of Commerce together early on. When I chaired the Bethany Development Authority, he was a member of the Development Authority. Then he went over as a trader and became a member of the City Council. And in that role, he and I went to Atlanta for an international conference of shopping centers at one point. I made the presentation at a joint meeting of the City Council and the Bethany Development Authority to do the original acquisition of Pauling's bait stand by the Development Authority as a project for economic development and to control the gateway into the city. And I followed Steve's progress as a businessman from a carpet cleaning business to the operation of Allen's Grill at the intersection of Rockwell and 39th Expressway. He used apparently his expertise as a member of the Development Authority to come back and ask for money to enhance the speed with which the service was rendered and thereby increase the number of hamburgers and hot dogs and an unknown relish, thus enhancing the sales tax to the city of Bethany. That was approved. We watched him renovate a little yellow house over close to Southwest Christian University. Did such a good job, he couldn't sell it for the sale price because he didn't have comps. And I've watched him put in a lift station on his father's property out there on Lake Overholser and 23rd Street, turned that from a rustic 1940s retreat into a very high-dollar gated community. That's where the property values have gone up over the years. I've watched his houses that he's put in the parade of homes over the years, sometimes winning 7 out of 8 awards in the various categories. I know that this year he sold a couple of very high-dollar houses, $1.6 million and $2 million, if I remember correctly. When our former mayor, Brian Taylor, asked me to serve as the planning and zoning representative on the TIF district, I said, well, I may have property that needs to be subject to a TIF, and Brian said, what better way to find out about it? I served as the chair of the steering committee for the comprehensive plan, which is the subject matter of our review of the TIF to determine tonight if it's in compliance with or consistent with and in accord with the tax increment financing. Steve served on that steering committee as well. But I share that so that you know that I too have an interest in this, but I do not consider it to be a conflict of interest. If it bothers any of you, you're welcome to speak. And if not, we'll invite Mr. Allen to come down.
Linda, do you have that resolution with you?
Thank you for those nice, kind words, Mr. Chairman. I had forgotten it's been almost 20 years. But a great 20 years it has been. First of all, I'd like to thank this body for hearing our presentation today. This is something that we're awfully excited about, that we've been working on for more than a year, trying to put together the right formula, what we feel the right development is for the city of Bethany, and also something that we can actually see happen and come to fruition. The previous owner of this property owned this land probably 13 to 15 years, had large ambitions to develop this property, actually purchased the property from the city of Bethany at that time when he purchased it, and nothing has ever happened. So with the current state of what the property is in, the free market just has not been in a situation to where it can be developed on the free market. Tax increment financing has been used quite a bit by the city of Oklahoma City to redevelop a lot of their downtown districts, and that is with those funds and the means of tax increment financing is how they've been able to redevelop things that otherwise would have been too costly to develop on the free market. So it's a very, very viable project. The counties are used to this type of thing. I do want to point out, this does not cost the taxpayers a single dime in taxes. This does not increase taxes for the citizens of Bethany. It does not increase the taxes for anybody. The taxes that are being collected and used are what would property taxes be. So right now, we'll see a chart here in a moment about what the piece of property today is collecting in taxes, and then we'll be able to show what the piece of property developed and installed with retail and things of that nature, what the taxes will be at that point. So the difference in what's being collected today and what it is going to be, the gap in between is what we propose to use to develop the property. And that's how tax increment financing works. So what we'd like to do is go ahead and start off with a little video presentation. This is a video that's going to show what our dream looks like. And then we'll be happy to go through the packet that you have and answer any questions and explain kind of some of the numbers and do some questions and answers. So this is driving down 39th Expressway. You see the Overholser Bridge. This is entering into the gateway of City of Bethany. This is a proposed sign that was dreamed up in the comprehensive plan. You can see signalization here at the intersection of Overholser Drive and 39th Expressway, which would be new. And then this is the current Overholser Drive, old Route 66. That's shopping there that we're driving by now. And then we're going to turn down Overholser Drive. And there's an iconic type restaurant here on the corner that can be seen from 39th Expressway. A children's play area. There's Lake Overholser. And this is another restaurant we propose on this corner that would have an amazing view of Lake Overholser. This is a hotel. And this is a roundabout in the middle. That Route 66 sign is designed for you to be able to see from Route 66 and draw you into the area. That's the back of the retail that fronts 39th Expressway. And this is a new medical facility that's proposed to be built. So in your packet, if you would like to turn to the page with the numbers, the budgeted numbers. This is the Bethany TIF District estimate. So at the very top, it says source of funds. This represents what is being collected today to the county for property taxes. So right now, the tax liability every year for this piece of property is $4,657. That is what is collected to go back to the coffers for the Oklahoma County to be divided up by the schools, the libraries, and so on. Over a 25-year period, that's the total dollar amount to be collected of the $116,000, if it remains just like it is today. Then you go down below that, and you can see the new buildings that are planned to be built, their new values that they would establish, and then you come down to the total new value of $17,256,000. You have the projected assessed value at the formula used by the county. That would be $1.898 million. The projected annual tax liability would collect $207,000 per year. We're proposing to use what would be projected of the $207,000 per year for the next 25 years, which is a total of $5.197 million. So how will we use the funds? It's just below that. The development, you've got the site, earthwork paving, drainage, pedestrian bridge, an extension of the little bridge over there by 39th Expressway to connect sidewalks, traffic signal and markings, site lighting, landscape and irrigation, and amenities. The total infrastructure cost is $4,005,000. A contingency on the development of 10%, which is the normal standard of $400,000. And then you've got engineering and permit fees, conceptual design and visualization, retail acquisition expense, land purchase and interest expense, payment reserves, and land acquisition opportunity, for a total projected cost of $5,086,500. A management fee for the developer for management of the project of $347,000. The total project cost $6,133,000. So you can see that what is available from the 25 years at the top of the $5.1 million versus the $6.1 million, the difference in that comes from the developer. Okay? Today, we've already expensed out of our own pocket $531,000 on this project to get it to where it is today. Any questions on the budget?
Steve, you might identify the penultimate item. We have to use big words tonight. Under the infrastructure cost, the land acquisition opportunity.
The land acquisition opportunity is there's a piece of land adjacent to this piece of property. Let me see if we can pull it up on the screen for you. Right down there. So a little bit of history. This entire piece of property, gosh, Gilbert, what year was that? 2002, 2003, was all designated by the new FEMA flood map to be in a floodplain. This entire 8 acres, plus across the river there where Mark Muse's new office is, that was also, part of that was also in the floodplain. At that time, Dan Galloway was our city manager, and he worked with FEMA and Oklahoma County to bring in hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of dirt to lift this entire site of this 8 acres out of the floodplain. They had to lift it about 3 feet, between 3.5, 4 feet. What's down there where the cursor is, the point cursor, was not part of this original property. And where that point cursor is still in the floodplain. Okay, so it's something that cannot be built on unless it's brought out of the floodplain. But right now, in its current condition, it's not buildable. So it's just a raw piece of land. The church owns that piece of property, and we put a budgeted item in there to perhaps be able to have the opportunity to buy that piece of property and then put a detention-type pond or a beautiful pond with a water fountain in it, so that you'll be able to see that adjacent from the restaurant and be able to have a patio off the restaurant, so it's a nice water feature. So that's what that budget line is for. We have not negotiated any terms or any deals with the church. It's just something that we would like to pursue if it's possible.
Which church?
It's the Lake Overholser Church of the Nazarene.
Okay. But if you bought it, you'd still have to bring it up 3 feet or so,
No, sir, because
You
we would plan to use that as just a pond,
just a pond.
a decorative feature pond.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be
Would that
okay.
be part of your site plan to have a detention pond or something like that, or just a pond?
It would probably act as detention. There's other areas on the back side of the property. So just to be clear, where the little river is that runs on the back side of this property, all of that property is owned by the Bethany Development Authority. So they own and maintain that. There's an option to have this piece of property become part of the Bethany Development Authority's property, or to absorb it into the development cost. Issues with maintenance, who's going to maintain it? Well, the whole property here, the whole 8 acres, all of those owners of all those buildings will have what's similar to a association, like a homeowners association. And so they will contribute every year to a fund that will have maintenance attached to it to maintain all of these different features and amenities, so that expense doesn't go solely onto the city.
Who administers that kind of thing?
There's a board that's elected, and the board
From the
owners,
renters there,
uh-huh.
leasees, whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Something else to point out, which is pretty important whenever you're doing tax increment financing, is a lot of times it takes a year or two to get all of the facilities built, sold, and so on. So what payment reserves means is we're taking money for budgeting to pay back the bond that would be sold by the city of Bethany to pay for the development. And what happens is the tax monies that are collected go back and pay back the bond. Does that make sense? So for the first couple of years, there's not going to be a whole lot of tax collected because all of the buildings won't be improved and won't be there. So we put $600,000 in reserves so that money can be used to make those payments while we're waiting for everything else to catch up. Any other questions on the finance side? Okay, if you'll turn the page, we'll go to questions and answers. So in our budget, we do not have, if you'll remember the Gateway iconic sign that suspended over 39th Expressway on the video, we put that in there because that was some ideas that were talked about in the comprehensive plan. In fact, there's a picture of that style of sign in the comprehensive plan. So we put that in there to grab attention. We plan to help the city pursue grants and funding. ODOT has some funds that would help pay for that type of a sign. In our proposal, as the developer, we will provide the legwork and the majority of the legwork to do all that grant writing and get all that applied for. So that would not be a burdened expense on the city. We would also pursue ODOT TAP funding for the sidewalk and trail. The idea on the back side of where the river is we want to connect Oklahoma City's trail through this piece of property so that bike riders that are riding down the trail on Lake Overholser will have an easy means of access to come over and spend money on our side of the street. So that's what that goal is there for. We'll pursue ODOT TAP money for site amenities related to historic Route 66. So that iconic sign that in the roundabout, we will use monies for that. And then we're also going to pursue other historic Route 66 grant opportunities. For this project to work, this needs to be a tourist destination. And everybody that travels Route 66 comes across Lake Overholser Bridge. That's one of the main stops. What we want to do is be able to capture them, the people that are traveling Route 66, have them come into our site and spend money dining and stay all night at the hotel. So that's what that purpose of the additional Route 66 grant monies are. There are monies out there to do that. They just have to be properly applied for. Design considerations, drainage and engineering study will be completed per the City of Bethany requirements. Paving and utilities will meet or exceed the City of Bethany standards. Parking will meet or exceed the City of Bethany ordinances and industry practices. And landscaping will meet or exceed the City of Bethany ordinances. And then I'm going to this page here. This is a timeline of where we are. So we've been working on this project since June of 2016, pretty hot and heavy. And this is kind of a schedule, a completion schedule, if you will. With one of our tenants, we have a requirement date that their pad must be available for them to start building the medical facility in September of 2018. We anticipate the development timeline to be 6 to 8 months after we get started, and we hope to start that right after the 1st of 2018. And so this gives you kind of an idea of the other things that are going to be happening in between there, but the goal is to get everything ready to be built on by the fall of 18. Any questions on the timeline? Okay, if you'll turn to the summary page. So what has been completed to date? The boundary and topographic survey is complete. The conceptual design and modeling is complete. The preliminary cost estimate is complete. A hotel feasibility study we have paid for, and it's complete. Consulting contracts, letters of intents reviewed for anchor tenants. We do have a contract for the Gilbert Medical Facility that might be named something else as a future date, and we have a letter of intent for the hotel site. Preliminary coordination with ODOT, the City of Oklahoma City, and the City of Bethany. ODOT touches this property, the City of Oklahoma City touches this property, and the City of Bethany. So it was quite a little challenge and very expensive to find out who owned what and who was in charge of what. That's all been determined now. We do know what that information is. The next steps is to complete the public hearings, finalize and execute a TIF development agreement. That's where the City of Bethany enters into an agreement with us, the developer, on how to get that development done so that when the development is complete, the City of Bethany can sell a bond to pay for the development, which will be paid back by property taxes in the future. Initiate ODOT right-of-way and transfer, that's the frontage road of Overholser Drive. Finalize design, engage general contractor, and secure remaining tenants is the next steps. And just for fun, because we do parking was going to be a fun topic tonight, we're proposing on the whole site to have 455 parking spaces, which meets or exceeds actually the requirements of the City of Bethany.
Can the school use them?
I'm sure we'd be happy to come with a cross-parking agreement that if those children wanted to walk that distance, they could sure use it.
It's part of the wellness program.
Any questions?
The bond you talk about, is that something that is to be approved by the citizens, or is that just a city?
No, that's a city function, nothing you would have anything to do with here.
Okay.
Steve, I had two questions. The hotel activity, tell us the nature of the hotel, the level of number of rooms, the type of hotel that you're anticipating.
What's being proposed right now is a Best Western Glow. The Best Western has introduced a brand new concept in hotels that's called the Glow. It's a little bit more of a modern design. The Best Western group has come down, visited the site, and has approved this location for one of their Glow opportunities. This would be the first hotel of the Glow in Oklahoma, and so we're pretty proud of that. Which we're also proud of is that we positioned on purpose the hotel to where the windows do not face the backyards of the adjoining neighbors across the river, okay? But what the way it's positioned, what makes it great is everything on the west side of that hotel is a lake view room. And currently in Oklahoma City, there is no hotel that can advertise a lake view room. So they'll be able to generate more revenue off of leasing out those rooms rather than just a standard room. So we thought that was a great thing to take advantage of the water that Oklahoma City enjoys and maintains, but we get to enjoy the benefits of the view.
The medical center, you mentioned in one of your previous things the location of it in regards to the residents and the orientation of the motel, so it does not look over into the backyards of
Right.
the neighboring community.
So the land as it sits right now, where the medical center would be, that would be a two-story facility. That's going to be about a 26,000 square foot facility. It's only 2 stories. The hotel will be 3 to 4 stories. It'll have the hotel will have 80 to 120 rooms. The land where all the trees are across the other side of that river is substantially higher than what the elevation is where the medical facility would sit. So we're comfortable that those trees that were planted by the city of Bethany 20 years ago will be a good facial block for that medical facility. Again, we've already addressed the window situation for the hotel. The medical facility at first was not a great fit for this project because I was really focused on retail. But when I would go and talk to restaurant owners and restaurant people that are potential to have a restaurant there, the first question they asked me was how many people will you guarantee to bring to the site per day? That was a good question, and I couldn't answer it. So I had to go find some answers. And I said, well, how many people do you need at the site per day in order to make your restaurant work? And the number was 350 to 400 people per day must visit that site for a restaurant to work. So that next week, we had a phone call from some of the doctors that currently reside at the Gilbert Medical Center, and they're looking for a place to expand and something new for more updated equipment and so on. And it just so happened that they actually bring about 400 to 420 people per day to their site. So that's where that was just kind of a match made in heaven, if you will. We had a little problem with them. They also required to have a certain number of parking spaces for their facility so that they would have ease of parking for those who come and visit. And so we've got about 161 parking spaces dedicated to the medical facility, which is above and beyond what's required by the code for parking. So that all ended up working. That was where we kind of started the design and worked our way around up to the front on 39th Expressway.
One other question that I know is going to be paramount to many of us, what is the city's liability in this type of program?
On a TIF, the city doesn't really have any liability. So this is kind of a public-private partnership to where I'm taking the risk to develop the property. I'm using tax increment financing funds to do the infrastructure and development that otherwise would not make sense financially to do just by myself as a developer. So the public-private partnership is between me and the city of Bethany. If these pieces of properties do not create enough finance to pay back that loan, they come back to me. I assume the risk. So this is really of no cost to the city. So how it works is the development would be complete, and then after the development's complete, the city of Bethany approves the complete development. Then we go out to secure a bond to pay for that development, and then the property taxes collected for the next 25 years goes to pay back that bond.
The medical facility orientation, that was determined how or why? Why that particular?
That was determined in order to be able to maximize the parking spaces around it and
So if
also
you
have
made it
ease of
parallel-
access for a handicap.
If you made it parallel to the hotel, it messes up the parking.
We could not get enough parking spaces for that large of a size.
I think also one of the considerations previously mentioned is that it's closest to the adjacent residential, and since it doesn't operate in the evenings, would minimize light or other intrusions.
Any other questions I could answer?
How many restaurants?
Right now, we're proposing 2 freestanding restaurants. We do anticipate there to be restaurant opportunity on the shopping center that faces 39th Expressway.
Are there some way that we can be assured that we won't end up like the proposed site down at 23rd and Council that's apparently not going to develop? You had nothing to do with it, but they were supposed to start and they haven't. It makes me wonder if we can put date certain starts, and I know you have a plan, but completions and all that kind of stuff.
Well, actually, there are several steps yet before it can start.
Oh, okay.
This is gonna have to have a site plan. It's gonna have to likely come before you for review of this stamp.
Okay.
Put under our code. And, the plans for the, water, sewer, and streets will, come to the city. So there are quite a few steps before
Okay.
we're ready to get to that yet. This is just a conceptual plan that you're looking at. This isn't the site plan or building plan.
Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know they were just doing conceptual.
I might just add something to what was said, and that is that tax increment financing is not just a way to help the developer to make it more money. The way I like to think of these is it's for development of property that but for the public participation would not develop. And this property, I think, is a classic example. It's sat vacant 30 years with a for sale sign on it, and nothing happened to it. But like I say, it's not to be used for every development. It needs to be something that, but for that public assistance, it wouldn't develop.
Any other questions?
Steve, if you'll stand aside a minute, let me offer the audience here the opportunity if any of them would like to come forward
Okay.
with any questions or observations. We don't have this as a call to the public, but we're going to treat it in that capacity. So if there is anyone here that would like to ask a question or offer any comment, be happy to have you come forward. Hearing and seeing none. Commissioners, further discussion?
I don't have any.
There is a resolution that's been prepared for your approval. I don't believe it got into packet.
The resolution number 2, it's in there.
The resolution, maybe here's what the resolution says. The resolution says that the impact of
That's
a
what I
tax
thought.
increment financing district on this property has a positive impact on the area and no negative impact on the other taxing jurisdictions
forward. That's basically what the resolution said. So a sufficient motion would be to approve the resolution that's titled just like it's listed on your agenda. You don't have to read all that either.
Okay, I'll do it again, so moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
If there's no further discussion, please cast your votes. This item will be heard by the City Council on December 12th, and then again December the 19th. Item number 3, item PC 1714, consider approval of the 2018 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting calendar. Commissioners, have you had a chance to review the enclosed calendar? An appropriate motion would be to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the proposed calendar.
Is there a second?
A second.
I know we changed. Cast your votes, please. Okay. Is there any new business to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission? I see that we have our city manager in the audience tonight, and I would ask that the city manager direct the appropriate parties to institute a ordinance addressing parking for schools, so we don't have to go through this again another time.
You mean universities?
Schools.
Schools, period.
Yes.
Any school. Okay.
Any other new business? Hearing or seeing none, we will adjourn till December 21st, 2017. Thank you.